My name is Megumi. I work for UNODC anti-corruption team, and I'm based in Thailand. My remit is the Southeast Asia region. So without further ado, let me introduce our panels. I think some of them have traveled from the furthest away places out of everyone that's here at the conference. Carmela, on my right, she's the Executive Director of the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. She has over 2 decades of reporting for media outlets like Rappler and The Guardian. Her reporting has focused on politics and security issues, particularly elections, campaign finance, South China Sea, Mindanao, and armed conflicts and peace talks. Marie Chua, she oversees the UNODC operation in the Pacific region, spanning from anti-corruption, but also transnational organized crime and maritime security. On my left here is Met Dara. He is an investigative journalist in Cambodia. Last year, he received the Hero Award by the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken for his reporting on the prevalence of cyber scam compounds linked to human trafficking, transnational organized crime, and corruption. And lastly, Georgina Kekea. She is a journalist with over 2 decades of experience in the media industry in the Solomon Islands. She's an advocate for human rights issues and is currently the president of the Media Association of the Solomon Islands. So thank you all for being here. Let me just jump right into it. So just to set a context, UNODC is currently supporting 2 media networks. So it's a collection of journalists. One in the Pacific region that was established several years ago already. And more recently, earlier this year in March, Carmela is facilitating Journalists Against Corruption. This is a network of Southeast Asian journalists just to focus on anti-corruption reporting. So I want to just set the context. We want to spend a few more minutes just to set the context. So let's start with the Pacific. Gina, for those who are not familiar with the Pacific region, what should we all know about the media landscape and also the challenges in reporting corruption?
Thank you, Megumi. Yeah, for the Pacific media, we also have a diverse group of media organizations. We do have some that are state-owned enterprises, comprised of private media entities, as well as some community outlets. And mostly for us in the Pacific, radio is the most crucial means of information for people. We live in little islands across vast ocean, so small island, mostly in the big ocean. So radio is the most mean of communication for the people in the Pacific Islands, and faced many geographical challenges, especially in terms of infrastructure. And for the independence of media, it varies. Some are free to report on issues. There are some restrictions. Sometimes it boils back to culture. Others, it comes back to economic challenges, where it's also poses a challenge for media in operation in the Pacific. So economic constraints can also impact the independence of media, mostly from the Pacific. And legal challenges, especially when it comes to reporting on issues. Journalists face mostly defamation, lawsuits against them. So those are some of the issues in the Pacific. Not so much killing, but mostly physical threats and harassment and intimidation against journalists doing their work in some areas. Digital and social media platforms, we are still trying to catch up with the rest of the world in terms of access to information through the internet. Some have higher access. For us in the Solomon Islands, I guess it's less than 40% of the population have access to to information through the internet. The rest are still without connectivity. So the challenges varies in the different island countries. One of the rising issue for us is misinformation and disinformation, mostly because of the literacy level is quite low in some areas as well. So NGOs and local organizations, they do try to support media, international organizations basically in building their capacity for the journalist studies. And also that is through training, networking and resources. And some are now starting to focus on investigative journalism. And in terms of corruption, I think corruption for the Pacific is the same as any other region. It impacts the governance development and mostly trust in the public on government. Anti-corruption laws and institutions do exist, like commissions and ombudsman, but some face challenges in terms of enforcement and the effectiveness of these institutions, mostly due to lack of resources to do their work. And mostly most of the anti-corruption activities are supported by the likes of Transparency International and UN. Regional cooperation through the Pacific Islands Forum, it also supports work of anti-corruption. That's through one of the vision they call the Te Aniwa vision. It's a regional framework which governments of the Pacific are obliged to keep their word to. And I guess that's about the Pacific for us. Many challenges, especially from islands in the big ocean. Some of the islands we live far from each other, so access to infrastructure, information is really limited. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Gina. I've personally never been to the Pacific, so I can only imagine, maybe just to give an idea, what sort of penetration rate of internet there is in the population of the Pacific Island countries?
It varies from country to country. I think some are more advanced than the others, and it depends on the geographical setting as well as the population as well. So some small island states, they're able to have like 70% internet penetration or 60, around 60. It depends on the island because some are very small island, so with less than 10,000 population, so it's easy for them to have access to infrastructure. Whereas for some big countries like Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, for instance, especially infrastructure to remote places in the islands, it's quite difficult for government, especially with economic constraints. So mostly infrastructure, so the media can go as far as the reach. So if infrastructure is not available for media to elevate their reach, it's not possible. Yeah.
Okay, no, thank you. So I'll now turn to Southeast Asia. Carmela, could you perhaps do the same, explain a little bit about the media landscape for the Southeast Asia region?
So good morning, I'm Carmela Fonbuena. It's truly an honor for Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism to be sharing the stage with our distinguished colleagues. So we thank the IACC for giving us the stage and to the UNODC for what has been a very productive partnership so far. So as Megumi mentioned, we formed in March this year, very new, a network of investigative journalists in the region, in the Southeast Asia. These are journalists who commit to do more reporting on corruption in our respective countries. And we call ourselves the Journalists Against Corruption, or JAC. We are very fond of this name because this has been democratically elected upon by the 35 original members of JAC. And I wish you could see the video where we voted on this name. We actually have a website. It's the pcij.org/JAC. You can see some initial information on the network. So we're very happy. So today is the last day of the IACC series. We're so happy to be having this session before we part ways because really we would like to invite investigative journalists in the region to join the network, and we'd really like to find like-minded organizations to partner with us and to support our organization. So we'll talk more about JAC later, but to your question, what are the challenges in Southeast Asia, and that's really the reason why we formed JAC. We formed JAC out of necessity because we've seen increasingly challenging environment, not just for investigative journalists, but also for the media in general and for press freedom in general. And this week, throughout the week, in our sessions here at the IACC, we've had so many investigative journalists telling us, showing us the heavy cost of standing up to power. And coming from our region, Mek Dara, during his breakout session on Tuesday, and Pia Ranada is here with us, my colleague from the Philippines, during her powerful message during the plenary on Wednesday, spoke about the way they and their organizations have been harassed by state actors and non-state actors. These are powerful people who do not want investigative journalists sniffing around to expose, their corrupt activities. And so, journalism is truly one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, and in the Philippines alone, over 100 attacks have been recorded since President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. came to power 2 years ago, and that includes 4 journalists getting killed. And the same in the Pacific. We have many colleagues facing court cases because of the work that they've been doing, and including Nobel laureate Maria Ressa, my former boss, was facing the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence if her cyber libel conviction is not overturned. So that's the situation in Southeast Asia, and these sustained attacks come in various forms. There are threats from government to shut down the operations of newsrooms. There are well-oiled campaigns, disinformation campaigns to attack the credibility of newsrooms and investigative journalists. And this means a lot of newsrooms have had difficulty sustaining operations. This means especially the organizations in communities. In the pandemic, they were forced to shut down. So there's been a lot of challenges. But today, I would also like to highlight not a unique challenge, because all over the world, journalists face difficulty in accessing data and information, but I think it's especially difficult in Southeast Asia, because in many parts of Southeast Asia, in many countries in Southeast Asia, we don't enjoy freedom of information like the rest of the world. In the Philippines, in fact, we still do not have a law. We still do not have a freedom of information law. We only have an executive order which covers the executive department. It does not cover the legislative. It doesn't cover the judiciary. And this week, it has been highlighted to everyone, the connection between human rights abuses, the environmental abuses. These are all rooted in corruption. But if we do not have the data to prove the corruption in these human rights abuses, in these environmental abuses, it makes it difficult for us to take the people responsible to account and hopefully stop all of these abuses of the environment and these human rights abuses. So you can imagine just how difficult it is for investigative journalists to do the work in the region, because it's difficult to get data. If we get data, sometimes it takes a lot of time. And then sometimes government doesn't collect the data at all. And sometimes, not all the time, when we get the data, the reliability of the information is not always also guaranteed. So there's really bad data all around in Southeast Asia. And I see here people who are nodding, people from Southeast Asia, because it has really been so difficult to get data and to process data in the region. So that's one. Also, Data Privacy Act has become a convenient excuse for some government agencies, not all, but some government agencies have used data privacy laws to restrict access to documents. So we cannot get procurement documents, we cannot get concession agreements, even if, they can actually redact those private information, right? And other government offices have precisely done that. But not all government offices are willing to do that. I think 2 days ago, I attended a session on election integrity, and it was just great to hear about the Tres de Tres campaign of Transparency International in Mexico, where the campaign, well, asks candidates in the elections to voluntarily release their information on their wealth and their tax payments, among others. And that has been so successful that it has prompted policies in the region to require, not voluntary, require the candidates to submit the same information during the election. So in the Philippines, the reverse has happened. We have this document called Statement of Assets, Liabilities, and Net Worth. Public officials are required to submit this under the law every year. And this was previously accessible to the public. And I joined PCIJ in 2021. Before I joined PCIJ, I've always thought PCIJ was almost synonymous with SALN because every year PCIJ will request for these documents, analyze these documents, scrutinize it, and follow the movements in the wealth of public officials. But in 2018, during the time of President Duterte, the Office of the Ombudsman said he's not going to release the documents anymore, that he didn't see the purpose in giving this to the media. And when we continued to ask the office for this document, but he would tell us, if you want that document, you go to the public official yourself and ask for the same document, as if the public officials will give it to us so we can investigate them, right? So it has been a very difficult environment for the Philippines. So I guess all of this, and I remember just this week I got a love letter from the Office of the President. No, it's a rejection letter for an information request that we asked the Office of the President about its review of a particular case on land reform, and we were told they will only give information to the parties of the case. That may sound reasonable, but precisely the farmers' complaint is they have not been updated with the proceedings. In fact, they almost missed the opportunity to file a motion for reconsideration because these farmers who were committed the land under the Agrarian Reform Program didn't even know that an application for land use conversion was filed. So that's really the case. But you know, we've been so used to these rejection letters. It's just one of the latest that we received. So I think to conclude, this information environment has prompted us to be more creative in finding the data, so to support our investigations. And that's why I've been jumping from one session to another, finding methodologies that we can replicate. So there's been a lot of technologies, tactics, tools that we could use, satellites, resources. But these techniques, these tools, these technologies also require resources. They also require expertise. These are resources and expertise that we do not always have. So that is also a challenge. So I guess I'll stop there. It's been a long list. But we'd like later to talk more about JAC and what we see as opportunities for JAC to help address those problems. Thank you.
No, thank you, Carmela. I'm always struck by the fact that we tend to lump Asia and Pacific as if it's the same region, because the challenges you highlighted related to infrastructure, people's ability to access news outlet, even, and then we spoke about very sophisticated tactic by state apparatus to limit access to information by journalists. And so that's a very different set of challenges. And I think I'm also seeing a huge commonality, and I think not just in this region, globally, journalists really risking their lives and safety to get the information that people need in order to hold governments accountable. So thank you for sharing that. Now I'd like to kind of highlight an experience of one independent journalist from Cambodia, because you've been awarded Heroes Award on your reporting on cyber scam compounds, which has really been dominating the news in terms of security, transnational organized crime, and corruption in the region, but also globally. So, Dara, if you could maybe explain how you started to report on this topic and also the challenges you encountered.
Yeah. So. Good morning, everyone, and I'm very delighted to be here and share personal experience, share the work that I have done locally and regionally with all of you. And I think before I start to talk about where we should start with like why I'm in here, like now I'm a kind of jobless slash freelance journalist slash research. So there is a lot of things to cover. So why I'm in up here? So we need to go back a little to get a little highlight about the background. So the three organizations that I had worked with, just to reiterate that they end up not very good, so have been shut down or selling. And one out of the three, like I have very like emotional to it. The second one we call Phnom Penh Post. So this one place it is touching me because like this place like a family to me, and we are very like delicate to work to serve the public.
Sorry, for those who don't know, Phnom Penh Post was shut down by the government for...
Actually, not shut down. The government said they have a problem with tax fraud. I think like in this region, like also recently in India, in the region, they use tax fraud, slap shoot, and other stuff, defamation, incitement to go after, to bring down the journalists who are hand down the corruption. So this is the very high stake barrel for journalists. So just a little bit coming back to the Phnom Penh Post. So yes, in one point, like my tears fall down without I don't know what to describe. It's just like when I seeing my foreign friend leaving the country. That is one of the touching emotion I have. That is the thing. So yes. So and then after the Phnom Penh Post sellings, I struggling and do some freelancing, and then I come back to the Post, and then I cannot stand. I go back to work. Not go back. I go directly to the VOD. That also reason last year I think they have problem and also have been shut down too. So whether it's a curse, so most people said that I'm a curse. Like wherever I go to work, it always shut down, or it's just a coincidence. Like you try to question yourself whether you bring a curse for other people or it's just they don't happy with your work. And so a little bit because globally, regionally now attention is moving to the cyber scam, human trafficking, corruption, money laundering around the globe. Undeniably, the U.S. starting to look into it. The Europeans start to look into it. The Australians start to look into it. So, and this is taking place. So I bring you to the location that many people the criminals use this place to conduct the money laundering or human trafficking. So the place in the top list is start with Myanmar, start with Laos, start with Cambodia, and it start spreading. And so pointedly dying directly into Cambodia. So I start doing this report in late November 2021, but before that, I have no clue. Actually, there is a police raid, arrest people since 2015. They arrested related to we call VoIP. It means voice over internet protocol. So like actually it happened long time ago, but nobody pay attention to it. And when they arrested 100, 200 Chinese, 100 Chinese, 220 Chinese with 100 phone desks, computer and other stuff. So and then they said like it is a telecom fraud, So the tone also keep changing also. So we can see. It happened a long time ago, but the journalists actually have never paid attention to it. And then it's starting from that point, it's starting to like, there is confinement, and there is torturing, there is, like kidnapping, there is killing, there is people jumping out the building, falling out the building. So it keeps increasing. And yeah, we see this in remarkably like in some province. I think the province, when I told you the name, you might have never heard of. So the one, Sihanouk province, Poi Pai, Svai Rieng, Kandal province. So these 4 or 5 province, if you go down there, you will see a lot of foreigners. You will see sometimes more nominally Indonesia now, like there is over 200,000 Indonesia or something. So why there is so many Indonesians in Cambodia? Why there are so many Chinese in Cambodia? Why there is so many Bangladesh? There is Sri Lanka and other people from the region in Cambodia, up in Cambodia. What do they are doing there? And so this is the thing that I have done. So to couple with, I give you one anecdote about the story. So the first start story, we met 3 or 4 very young Chinese kids who just newly graduate from university, looking for a job, end up in a compound, do the scamming, and then luckily they have been recruited. They're telling their story, and we have seen so many posts. I just take one example, like he posted. He said like he want to quit the job, and then he was taken to a dark room. He was electric shock with bottoms, and then he also have a knife on his neck, and then also the guard said like, if you don't want to do it, we will throw your body into the sea for the fish. So there is a lot of many countless anecdotes, even could worse than this one. Sometimes they cannot be seen alive. So there are many stories that I really want to dig into, but since I do not really have resource to do it. So this is one of the negative side that I cannot do my work also. And okay, I still have more minutes. Okay. So and yes, so regarding to that, at that time, after I have covered, so there is numerous. So in order to get out of the compound, there is numerous ways. So they have to write on the former PM Facebook, Ministry Interior Facebook. They have to write to the governor, to everyone, in order to get released. But some people can be released, some people cannot be released, and some people have been recruited by the police. But in one point, when they take a picture and the video, and then the day after they get back into the compound. So the question, whether there is collusion or not. So this is, you can make your own judgment.
So you're taken back by state authorities, or we don't?
Yeah, so like this is a good example. Like, so I can tell you like whether there is corruption in this and implicated in this or not. But there is so many examples that there is a victim have been in up like. So I give you another example. Like we have a list. So we went down with a recruit team. We have a list of 10 people. Go down to Sihanouk. We know all the compound. We know their passport. We know their room number. We go to from the commune level to the district level to the province level. We say what they are confining. They asking for release. No one get out among the 11. Additional to that, they have been sold to other compound. And then also there is hotline, and the hotline said, oh, they cannot release because this is nature of working condition. Because the condition of working is because they take the money, company money, so they cannot leave compound. If they want to leave the compound, they have to pay the money. That's it. And then to leave the compound, you have to pay like 10K, 20K, 50K or something. And then very sadly, there is one story. It is we call a blood slave. I think some of you might heard or might never heard of. So this guy who have a Chinese association who try to help many recruiter to release many his citizen, but because our I also did the story like there is one guy he claimed that his blood was taken, and then we covered that. It was very very urgent, very quickly. So like we go make just very quick, and then the story out, and then we do not put his name, but other media put the leader of the team who recruited. So he was arrested and charged with incitement. So you can imagine like the person who stand out to recruit going to jail. And I also want to point out that he also have a strong connection with the police. So also in some part when you work with the police, it also difficult like the police know your inside information. So that is very 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 hard. So and then move to the corruption very quickly. So many international newspapers have been covered about Cambodia's corruption, like the New York Times, about about this human trafficking, about the scam compound. But still, who cares? Because the point is that in Cambodia we live in a normal life in corruption. So like in the Cambodian book, like it says, public school is free. But if you go, you pay the money. We live like this is part of I have to pay, because if you don't pay, your working, your paper, family, book, other stuff is not moving. So we live in corruption atmosphere. So we call it room do what the room and do. In short, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dara. Really, really shocking stories. I wanted to also highlight your role in the reporting of these stories. And I picked up already, I think that's really stressful to day in and day out report on these stories. So I think there's a lot of need for psychological support, perhaps. Are there other things that you wish, you would have benefited from in terms of supporting you as a journalist?
Yeah, there is a lot of... I should not complain about it because it doesn't matter, you keep complaining, nobody give a shit about you, So you have to fight for your own
No, I care.
Yeah. So I have complained 5 years or 10 years. And I have met I have met many people too. I have seen people promise you, oh, you're going to get this, you're going to get that. But at the end of the day, you don't. No, it just come in like election campaign. Yeah. Every 5 years they come to say, hey, hello, hi. We're going to promise you this and that. And then 5 years on, you never see him again. So that is sadly thing about the journalist. I see almost everyone have experienced this. It is very tough battle. But the good thing is that we have to stand together and fight to the end. If we don't stand together, we never ever win this battle.
Okay, well, that's beautiful. And thank you for the good segue to talking about the networks. So perhaps I can go back to Gina, please, on the Pacific Paction, the journalist network in the Pacific. Could you explain a little bit about what that's about and also the results you were able to achieve together?
Yeah, I think earlier on when I talked about the media in the Pacific, I think there was some information that would be quite relevant, especially leading up to what PACGEN stands for. Camila talked about the Philippines. They have more than 100 million population. For us in the Pacific, Solomon Islands, we have 700,000 population. Fiji, almost 1 million. So you can see how much more the challenges which the Philippines are faced with, especially when it comes to accessing data and all that. For us in the Pacific, that's really very far. One is human resources, human capital for one. We just do not have the capacity to tackle those issues. For us in the newsrooms, like for Solomon Islands, for instance, all of the newsrooms have less than 10 journalists operating, giving out information on a daily basis. And for the print media, they're expected to deliver 3 stories a day. That's minimum. So when you talked about giving out information or even covering corruption cases, for instance, that's really something which is really far. They're just working day to day just to deliver on a daily basis. For some newsrooms, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, for instance, they have bigger newsrooms, and their media has been well established for many years. I think the national broadcaster is celebrating 50 years, that's Papua New Guinea. Solomon Islands, the national broadcaster has celebrated 75 years already, but still lack the infrastructure. They claim to reach across whole of Solomon Islands, but they do not. They just have one transmitter sitting close to the airport, claiming to reach across 28 square miles of land and water, which is really something that's impossible. So coming to those challenges that we are faced with and the human resources that we have in the newsrooms, it really makes it impossible for us to do investigative journalism work. We do not have dedicated reporters to do journalism, investigative stories. Mostly it's just filling in the paper, even the news for the radio, television for some. So PACGEN was established in 2019. It was through the chief executive officers of media organizations in the region. They met in New Zealand, and they decided that having a pool of reporters dedicated to doing investigative journalism would be one area which they would like. The umbrella body of the media associations, which is called the Pacific Islands News Association, PINA. So PINA has a president who's the manager for National Broadcasting Corporation of Papua New Guinea. The vice president is from Solomon Islands, so it has board members that comes from the different Pacific Island countries. And some of the Pacific Island countries, mind you, they don't have any independent media. Kiribati, for instance, they only have one independent reporter that does freelance work. He does correspondent work for ABC, Radio Australia, as well as write for The Guardian. Nauru, they don't have any independent media. Kiribati, same. There's only the public department of the government. That's the government communication unit. Tuvalu, the same as well. So some of the Pacific Island countries, they don't have independent journalists. So having this network where journalists collaborate in the Pacific region, it helps, especially to uncover stories. New Zealand and Australia, they do have the capacity where they have Pacific journalists, so they're able to send in the journalists, as we term them, parachute journalists. They fly in, get the stories, fly out. So that do happen in the Pacific region, where Australia and New Zealand and some from the European countries as well are able to send journalists to uncover the stories in the Pacific region. So the PACGEN was established specifically just for investigative journalism and to support journalists in the Pacific region in terms of capacity building, network, peer-to-peer support, those kind of things. So that's how the establishment of the PACGEN was made, based on the challenges faced in the Pacific region. And the chief executive officers themselves, the editors, they realized that that's an area which media in the Pacific was not able to cover because they just do not have dedicated reporters to uncover the stories that matter to the people. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what I can say about the Pacific Anti-Corruption Journalist Network. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I can imagine with small population, I think some of the countries have like 1,000 people on the island, right? So there comes the challenges of difficulty in reporting corruption that involving someone you might know or your family might know. So thank you for sharing. Carmela, now I would like to ask the same question for, sorry, Marie. Because you lead the anti-corruption work for UNODC in the Pacific, I would like to like you to put PACGEN into context of the overall anti-corruption work that you're leading in the Pacific Island countries.
Thank you, Megumi, and thank you for the opportunity to talk here. To respond to your question, I just wanted to perhaps go back a bit and to take a step back into explaining the framework of action in relation to anti-corruption in the Pacific. And you've heard Gina referring to the Te Inua vision. So the Te Inua vision is the collective approach to anti-corruption that's been adopted by the leaders in 2020 and then endorsed by the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, Pacific Island Forum in 2021. And I'll explain a bit what is the Pacific Island Forum. So the idea of the Te Inua vision is really to have a collective approach. Some of and most of the challenges that are faced by the Pacific Island countries in relation to corruption are the same. And some of the answers actually are quite similar. So it's really a recognition in saying, yes, all the countries in the regions are signatory to the UN Convention Against Corruption. They're also all committed to the SDG. But what is it back home, and what is important to look at in relation to the region? And that was how the Te Inua vision was adopted. And just perhaps, I think the culture is really something really important in the Pacific. After a few years in the Pacific, I've really felt it. And I think the word Te Inua, which I still apparently don't pronounce it correctly, is a Kiribati word for sailing canoe. And why am I saying that? Is because this imagery of the name of this vision is also showing how collective approach to corruption is. So sailing canoe means that the canoe, where all the part of the canoe are together, they tie together on rough sea. The Pacific doesn't really hold it to the right name. Pacific is not really Pacific in terms of the sea. So the sea can be rough, but everybody is going to the same direction. And they need to be together in the canoe to be going into the right direction. And that's the idea of the canoe. And that's the reason also why the media is important, why the CSOs and the leaders and the government is important. So I just also like to go back into what is the Pacific Island Forum. You've heard about it. It's an intergovernmental organization, so aimed at enhancing cooperation among the members of the Pacific Island. It enhances economic, but also social well-being of the people of the Pacific. And it's really about harmonizing regional position on policy and political issues. So if you may, and it's perhaps an extension, but it's a bit like the EU of the Pacific. A difference, but it's really going together and working together to address issues that are common. And then some of the answers are common as well. So just to go back into this, it's key to ensure that there's a high-level commitment to corruption, to anti-corruption. And this will bring change. But as you were saying, it's important to keep the leaders accountable to the commitment and also accountable to the implementation of this vision. They've committed to it. So how to help them to continue to really implement the vision and implement what their commitment. And so under the Te Inua has been a great tool in this sense. It's been an entry point for journalists in saying, this is what you've committed to. How can we help you to continue the journey? How some of the actions might not be actually conducive to implement the Te Inua vision. So spreading the voice, but also keeping the momentum, keeping the leaders on their toes. And as Gina was saying, New DC has helped the network to continue their work in relation to facilitation of meetings, providing targeted training. So corruption, as we've heard throughout the whole week, is linked to a wide range of other crimes. So it's also looking at using the anti-corruption lens in covering other crimes. So cybercriminality. So what is the link? So having those webinars or trainings, specific webinars or trainings with journalists has been very helpful. And there's also a part that we haven't touched about yet. It's the code of ethics or conduct. It depends from one country to another one for media associations. So how how to report ethically and how to be protected through this code of ethics as well. One of the thing that I wanted to discuss was the Tenua Vision Toolkit. So this is a toolkit that's been developed last year and by the journalist that you were actually referring to, who is based in Kiribati, the only independent journalist based in Kiribati, who's been helping to develop this Tenua Vision Toolkit. So the idea is to really provide the capacity for the journalists to use the anti-corruption lens to the reporting. So the anti-corruption, to look at what can be done in relation to reporting on anti-corruption, but linked to other type of criminality, for example, money laundering, but also right to information. How does that play in? Right to information, money laundering, ethics, but also national anti-corruption policies. Do they really fit into the Tenua? Do they help you to implement the Tenua vision? And then also, I think I also wanted to perhaps take one example of the thing that we've seen that is developing. I mean, it's often hard to see what are the numbers of journalists, anti-corruption, specific investigative work that has been done and can't. I mean, just to go for numbers, but in 2021 there were around 200 articles in the Pacific on anti-corruption. I think we're now at 500 or 600 per year. So it's really shown that there is an interest in covering more anti-corruption issues. I don't think it shows that there is more corruption. I don't want to cross this bridge. I think it's more that the journalists are becoming aware that the anti-corruption lens is really key and is really helping to cover it more. And one last point is about the advocacy and lobbying role that the Media Association through the Journalists Web Network applying. We've heard that some of the journalists that are in the PACGEN are not specifically independent, but I think that's also the strength of this journalist network. It's not segregating anyone. It's about sharing together knowledge, networking, relationship, and then having this possibility to be discussing together. Doesn't mean that you are exactly the same type of journalist or you exactly agree with what the other one is doing. It's really not the idea. It's really to have this possibility to have a neutral ground, to share reflection and also to be stronger. Because a lot of those investigations have a regional aspect and they need to be getting the information through each other. So I hope I responded to your question.
Yes,
Thank you.
And sorry, I forgot your turn to speak.
That's all right.
No, I wanted to ask, some journalists not being independent, you mean they work for state-owned outlets? Or
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
In some countries, as Gina was saying, we're speaking about some countries that are 1,000 inhabitants. So it's difficult for an outlet to be, in this sense, to find funding. So there are countries that are state-owned enterprises.
Yes. Thank you. And I think that's really powerful, the quantitative increase in reporting of corruption reporting in media outlets. Thank you. Finally, your turn.
Back to me.
That. Yeah. Tell us about Jack. And
Okay.
Yeah.
So some hopeful talk finally. After talking about a lot of challenges, we're looking some light at the end of the tunnel a little bit. So we formed Jack really out of necessity, given the increasingly challenging environment for journalists. And we know that networks work. Networks are helpful. Networks have allowed journalists to work with each other. Networks have allowed journalists to seek help from like-minded allies. And there's so many networks already. You have networks among environmental journalists, networks among journalists covering human rights issues, networks among journalists advocating for press freedom, media safety. And with the support of the UNODC, we're able also to finally form a network of journalists who will focus on anti-corruption and who better to partner with than UNODC, the guardian of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. So we formed the network in March, and it was we had very robust discussions about where we want to bring this network three main things, maybe four. First, we wanted training on investigating corruption because we need to upskill a lot of journalists to understand, corruption can be very complicated. We need to understand the infrastructure to be able to report on corruption. Number two, there was a very specific request for OSINT skills, for OSINT investigation skills. And this is really, I think, a response from the increasingly restrictive information environment because we can't get data anywhere. We know that there are a lot of tools online that will help us find data for our investigation. That's number two. Number three, not very much related actually to JAC as an anti-corruption network, but there's really a strong push for training on social media because I think we all recognize as investigative journalists that we don't want to be writing fantastic, powerful investigative reports that nobody reads. So there's also a call for journalists to be trained on social media skills so we can share to a wider audience our investigations. Number four, as a result of these trainings, the participants said they wanted to be able to get grants to produce stories like Mek Dara has mentioned. He wants to do a lot of stories, but he doesn't have the resources to continue his reporting. So that's one opportunity that JAC members will have. But also we want collaboration. So it's one thing to work on investigations in our respective countries. It's another to work together because as we know, corruption is really a transnational operation. So it's going to be helpful if we can follow the money together. So that's the ambition of the network. And I'm also our title card is staring at me. That painting actually was painted during our discussions when we were when we were listing down what did we want to do, what are the biggest challenges for the organization. So we had we have an artist doing a live painting during our discussion, and that's the output. That's by the PCIJ artist Luigi Almana. So out of these conversations in Manila in March, we are going to have our first face-to-face training activity next month in July. We're very happy that we're finally doing that so soon after our launch. So based on the requests of the participants, the priorities they identified, we're going to do training on investigating corruption, focusing on online scams, precisely because it's a growing plague in the region. And we've invited Mek Dara to share his methodologies to the participants, share his lessons and experiences. We will also do skills training on OSINT investigation. So we're getting experts from UNODC, we're getting journalists from the region, we're also getting CSOs to help us understand the infrastructure of corruption in online scams. So very exciting opportunities for JAC. We have the momentum at the moment with a lot of support. But obviously, we also understand, we are very conscious that the momentum needs to continue, meaning it shouldn't end with the first training activity, it should be a series. So we should think of compelling issues in the region. What should we investigate next? Should it be human trafficking? Should it be money laundering? Very specific to the corruption angle, how corruption happens in this issue. So that's what we want to happen. Very promising because we've been approached by organizations. For example, we're now in talks with an organization in East Timor. They wanted to bring JAC members to East Timor to share lessons with, to train journalists in East Timor. So that's one activity in the lineup, and then several more talks that I cannot yet announce because nothing has been signed yet. But hopefully we continue. We hope to have those opportunities to work with like-minded allies, and everyone's pretty excited to see each other again. We had a lot of fun in Manila, so we're very happy to see each other again in Bangkok next month to do the training. So we want to make sure that it's like you said, like Mek Dara said, when you work with journalists, when you work with organizations, it feels like your family. So that's what we hope to happen with JAC. Like we become a network of journalists and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmela. From UNODC, it's also our honor to partner with you and PCIJ, who took on this coordinating network with so much enthusiasm and ownership and, willingness to push this forward, going beyond Philippines and reaching the regional scope. I would like to ask Dara how, from your perspective, how Jack could help you or your colleagues, and then I'll move on to open the floor for Q&A.
Thank you. So, little to add, I forgot to mention another example about the corruption scale. So, we have covered a lot. So, there is my story and my other colleague story really implicate showing clearly, sometimes show very clearly, sometimes show not in depth about how much the authority involved in this kind of scam industry. I can also give you one example that is we call counter fighting against the fake product something. So there is a clear evidence publicly, it's there is available that is that unique extorting the money about 100K from the business owner, and it's publicly, and then the whole entire department just reshuffle. No one go to jail. So I just want to say that the corruption is very so in depth, and in our country, badly I think in Vietnam, there is a lot of changing. They change a lot of ministers, they change a lot of prime minister, presidents. But in my country, it's if you are in the central or permanent committee, you get a bulletproof lifetime. No one there to touch you. So it doesn't matter what mistake, it doesn't matter what corruption you do, it doesn't matter what crime or you rap or And one point, my PM publicly said his nephew is going to kidnap one female, and then he said without his intervention, the court would arrest him. So he's the one who intervention not to have arrest. So you can see he publicly said that he committed crime, but who going to hold him accountable? Yeah. No one going to hold him because he is the one who the prime minister. So that is completely a blow. Yeah, and so regarding to Jack, so I think it will be very, very helpful for me and other journalists in the locally, in the region, in the global. So first one, it could making increasing the space, media outlet space. What I'm referring to, it could be as me, I can find more through Czech, so I can find more other media outlet to publish my story, and other people also can find media outlet to publish their story. And secondly, I think also can help building the trust between CSO and private sector and other partner. In here, very difficult. I give you one example. That is the challenge of the journalist also. So I went to one workshop, and that NGO is working with human trafficking. And then it's I want to reach out to him. I asked him, could you hand me a name card, please? And then he doesn't want to. So you can see this is a barrier. The NGO do not trust you. The NGO believe that you are trying to destroy the victim reputation, damage the reputation. They believe that journalists could be a monster, try to destroy, So I think the most important, CSO also need to understand, before you make any prejudgment, so please check my background before, okay, if you want to, you need to openness to the journalist too, before you make any judgment. That is the challenge for journalists. And another one, I think the resource. So I think the resource, it would be very, very helpful. I think whether it is capital or whether human or other resource that can help to make sure that the journalists can do their job more effectively and more in-depth, and to serve the public, fight against corruption together. And building the network. I think also like it can link like, you know, also from the region. I think like I cannot speak Indonesian, I cannot speak Chinese, I cannot speak Malay and other language. So with this network, I think it can help me get access to that, help me go to the field, and then can link the connection between Cambodia to Malaysia, to Indonesia, to Thailand, to Laos, to Myanmar, to the US, to Europe. And also, lastly, I think also about the slap suit. Also, it could be you know, like whether they have any support, you know, for this kind of thing. So as long as you go after the corruption, they unhappy with your story, they can use a slap suit to target you, and could be even worse, could be shut down your organization. So we need to make a preparation, a good preparation for the worst thing to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dara. Now I'll open the floor for any questions. Please raise your hands if you have any.
Thank you. Annika, UNODC, based in Bangkok. Thank you very much to this panel. It's great to see two networks in place. And it kind of made me think of the proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think this is what these networks are really trying to create. But I do have a question in terms of trust. How can you trust each other? In part, you were saying, you know, you have state-owned media working alongside independent media in this network. And then also in Southeast Asia, kind of establishing it. So how do you really work with that to ensure that there is that trust between members? Thank you.
Would you like to take it?
Can I go first? Okay, I think someone mentioned earlier about culture, and I think for us in the Pacific, it has always been our culture that's been one that's unite us. For us in the Solomons, I will give example, like one of the challenges that we face is we have most of the good journalists, I would say, those that went to university, came back, worked in mainstream, and then they move on into government departments as public relations officers. But still at the heart, they are still journalists by profession. So mostly we are very small. As I mentioned, the population is really small. Basically, everyone knows each other. It's really hard for any journalist not to know another journalist, especially if you're working in the media communication space. So basically, generally when it comes to trust, there's general consensus between journalists and public relations officers as all work hand in hand together. Sometimes the public relations officers, they also support journalists in terms of access, behind the scenes, of course. But yeah, but generally, because we're such a small place, everyone knows each other. Yeah.
Does anyone else want to respond?
Yeah, I think, I echo what Gina's saying. It's about cultivating understanding and perhaps focusing on commonalities. Some of the problems are the same, access, funding, and then some of the answers are the same as well, in terms of like having a code of ethics, that you have the same code of ethics, everybody has the same code of ethics or conduct, means that's the commonality that will hold you and makes the trust stronger as well.
And then for Southeast Asia, it's very clear to us, especially because the network is very new, that we need to trust each other for the network to grow. And that's been very clear from the beginning. That's why it's very clear we need a network. We all agree that we're going to build a network. What we still took the effort to have that whole day consultative meeting just to make sure that we're all in the same place as far as the appreciation for where the network should go. That's why we listed down the priorities, and we're responding based on the priorities that we agreed on during the Manila meeting. I think we need to continue to be consultative, and this we've done also online sessions, at least 2, on data and beneficial ownership, and these are great. The face-to-face engagement, the one we're going to hold in Bangkok, is going to be very important in building this network, in building the trust among the network members. we obviously handpick the first members of the network, organizations with a good record in investigative journalism. And based on my experience, when you're investigative journalists, you have common shared appreciation, shared values, shared ethics. So that's given from the get-go. But we do not want to limit this network only to the seasoned investigative journalists, but precisely we want to grow the network. We want to be able to recruit more newsrooms to do more investigative journalism. And that, I think we have a good foundation to be able to do that. We bring in more. Obviously, we need to make sure there are rules who can come in, because everyone needs to be committed to this work. It's all fun now because we've just had a first meeting, we're doing a second meeting, but once we do the stories, we will be confronting, for sure, the challenges that will test the network, the commitment of the network and the support given to the network. So trust is very important. So I think every step of the way we build that, and it's important to ride on the momentum, make sure that we take all the opportunities to build the network and find allies that will support the network the moment we produce those, uncomfortable stories, because obviously that is the objective, right? We form the network now to produce investigative stories, and we know what happens when we produce investigative stories.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thanks. John Hyde, I'm declaring an interest. I'm actually with the Pacific Anti-Corruption Journalists Network as well. And Jeannie, you've spoken before, almost in that image of being on the boat. Journalists are there with government, with public relations officers, ombudsman staff, and often ombudsman and auditor generals. They have communication officers before. Those of us in a European or Australian context, we see these PR people as the enemy, whereas in the Pacific, you're a lot more smarter at working with them, that you're all actually working on anti-corruption, so whether they're government or not. Whereas, I guess, here in Europe, and sometimes with us, it's anti-government, they're the bad guys. So how do you keep promoting this relationship? You said in your last answer to Annika's question about, informally, but I mean, I've seen it, the PR people often come to you to put out stories.
Yeah, thank you, John. I think one of the roles and the functions of the network, as well as the associations, we sort of act like a buffer between government stakeholders, and for the network itself, like one of the activities is building the capacity of journalists, which we see the formation of the toolkit, which supports journalists in identifying or aligning corruption stories, especially to the Te-Aniwa vision. But coming back to PR and journalists in general, capacity building, or I usually say that for us in the Pacific context, some work with very limited resources. They don't have cameras, mostly use phones, or don't even have the equipment that they need to enhance their jobs. But one of the advice which we always like to let them know is that the most important equipment or tool that you need to do your job is this just the stool up here. You build your knowledge, you build your database, and that's through learning, through workshops, whatever opportunities are out there. As long as you build yourself, the knowledge that you have, make sure that you also not try to make you have to work smart, be strategic in how you do your job as well. And as part of our work for the associations, I try to identify some of the gaps which we see in our journalists, and we try to come up with trainings, which we of course have the permanent secretaries from the government ministries. If it's a workshop on extractive industry, we'll have the government official coming over and explain how the government, how people apply for license when it comes to mining, And some of the public servants, they are really good public servants too. It's just that the perception of the public, that's always something which we have to really identify what's fact, what is disinformation, what is misinformation. And coming from the Pacific, where a vast majority of the people, the literacy level is very low, and then we have the internet. There are some who are online just to disinform, some misinform. So really unpacking all those information and trying to identify what's facts. And for us journalists, it's really important for us to build ourselves in enhancing our knowledge, and what way to enhance our knowledge then through these activities, through the form of workshops. So extractive industry, for instance, the anti-corruption, the Tianiwa vision, which Pak JN has been focusing its sessions on. So there are so many issues which needs to be uncovered, and we can only uncover those issues if we understand them better. And having these sessions, it also builds us closer to our colleagues in the public relations space, because they're the ones controlling the flow of information from their side and to our side. And as I mentioned, them being, once you're a journalist, you always have this journalism in you, whether you're in PR or whether you're in government, you will still have this fondness inside you of being a journalist first and foremost, and you will often, lean towards your peers, although you put on a public relations front when it comes to your work with your employer. But there's always this thing with journalism that stays. There's always the journalist in you, regardless of where you go. So that's the beauty which I found in the Pacific region, where regardless of journalists going into professions as public relations officers or communications officer, but when it comes to the work of journalists, they really do support us in this instance, and that's very unique, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think it is.
Can I just perhaps, I think I also wanted to take some examples of this happening in terms of helping to bridge the gap, if there were gaps, where the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat last year created this opportunity for journalists to be briefed ahead of the leader summit. So every year, all the leaders of the 18 countries from the Pacific are meeting. And it's technical. It can be technical. It's not everything is open door. And having a pre-briefing to journalists that was organized by the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, so the secretariat body of the Pacific Island Forum, to journalists, and a number of Pacific Anti-Corruption Journalist Network were there, and to provide them the possibility also to directly have discussions with the leaders. Because they opened the dialogue there and provided the opportunity to do that. So I think it's also, those are the sessions that are in place, or Talanoa sessions, or in the Pacific, or in Fiji. Talanoa is the place where you speak. And if I understand right, the culture in the Pacific, there is a lot of, if speaking is important, doesn't mean that all the things will be on the table, but speaking and discussing and bridging the gap and trying to understand, meeting each other at each point is the key part. So that's something that we've already also tried to establish with some anti-corruption commissions and Pacific Anti-Corruption Journalist Network, is for them to understand each other better, and that the journalists not seen reporting against on something they don't understand. No, reporting on something that they understand very well doesn't mean that they will be in favor of the government, but it's just they understand it very well.
Yeah.
They've been briefed on how it works, and then so bridging the gap is an important part as well.
And if I might add on to what Marie said, it's not only about reporting on enhancing your report on the issues, but also when you know the in and outs better, you will also identify the gaps, where corruption can come in. So it also helps journalists to identify when things are not right. You get to understand, oh no, this is not right. How are you able to, why did this thing happen?
Yeah.
So you can report on the other side as well, because you really know for a fact that this is how things should be done. and yet it's been done the other way. Something is not right. So questioning on the other side as well.
Yeah.
And if I could also
Yeah.
chime in very briefly, in terms of working with the government, that's precisely what we'd like. We want a healthy relation. Journalists want healthy relationship with government. Please give us the data we ask for. Please let us know what's happening in the investigations. In fact, there are good people in government, and these are our sources. You know, they could be the ones whispering to us some information, and Gina is winking at me because that's what happens. We develop good relationships with good people in government, and I think it's been emphasized all week that government agencies should not look at journalists and CSOs as the enemies, because we should be fighting the same thing. We should be fighting corruption. So we should help each other in terms of giving each other information. We publish our stories, get us access to documents that will allow us to write stories. Like you said, there's a lot of government programs that journalists would also like to be familiar with, so we can report on these issues properly. So there should be a healthy relationship. The problem really is when state actors look at the media, look at the CSOs as their enemies. That's where the problems happen.
Thank you.
Hi, Pushpan from C4 Center. Thank you for the panelists for sharing that information. I think I can see where the question can be an impactful organization. But looking forward in terms of is there plans to come up with trainings for young journalists to indulge in or get into investigative journalism? Because, for example, in Malaysia, it's a dying art. People are doing reporting rather than investigative reporting. So is there any plans for the coalition or the group to actually look at maybe doing this kind of training in the future?
Yeah. May I perhaps?
Yeah, I think that's really a challenge. Increasingly, a lot of journalists are shying away from long-form journalism. I've been told we do a lot of long-form journalism at PCIJ, so not a lot of journalists want to write long-form stories. But there is importance in the long-form reports because we investigate stories. It puts flesh into the investigations that we do. So there needs to be training on this. We need to continue to recruit young people to continue to do the work. We do. I think it's a matter of finding them, because we do have interns. Because we're specifically an investigative journalism outfit. Those who want to be investigative journalists are the ones who apply as interns to the organization. I think the important thing here is to provide the mentorship, so they do not discourage amid all of the challenges, because it's easy to be discouraged. In fact, even in the Philippines, we've seen some exodus of very great journalists to the private sector and to the government because of the challenges. It's really not, sometimes it's so crazy to still be a journalist. But we have to precisely provide that environment so that practicing journalists stay. So they continue to be investigative journalists, but also to nurture the future. I don't think there's lack of interest. But, if we don't provide them the support, that's when they lose the interest. Because I think there's a lot of people, a lot of young journalism students who recognize the power of investigative journalism. We need to provide that support. We shouldn't discourage them by, outfits shutting down here and there. They need to see a future in investigative journalism. So that's hopefully something we can help in.
And I think from our side of the world, increasingly, the quality has also dropped as well, especially when it comes to young journalists coming out of school. So it really need time. Again, it comes back to the editor or the chief of staff when it comes to mentoring, guiding. We expect that to be done in universities, but then when they come out from schools, you have it like starting all over again. But that's one thing which we would love to prioritize, especially having, the young ones taking on the passion for the for the work, especially in doing investigative journalism. For us in the Pacific, it's really difficult. As I mentioned, we are very small, so journalists are always subject to bullying, harassment. Not only that, the culture, some of the Pacific Island countries in Polynesia or Micronesia, for instance, they are very strong yet in how they live amongst themselves. Even some of the island countries, on Sundays, everything closed, it's just going to church, those kind of things that happen back in the island. So it's really a struggle for us. For us in the Solomon Islands, unfortunately, I think for the University of the South Pacific, for the past 20 years, we have only seen 30 plus journalists that graduated from the university. So that's a very small number. So we need to make journalism sexy so that young ones can want to come out and join the profession of journalism. And, that's something that we need to do, especially if we want to attract young ones into this field. And carry on the legacy which some of us are hoping to leave behind when we go.
And Megumi, maybe last point. I think it's a very important question because we need to recruit journalists of the future. I go back to one of the priority points of Jack, social media. I think as PCIJ, it's important for us to keep producing the long-form journalism, because it's a complete story of issues that we cover. But we've also been doing a lot of consultations on how to innovate investigative journalism. We talk about the young. They prefer videos. They prefer photographs. They prefer more modern execution of stories. So for PCIJ, we think we need the long form, but we need to convert this long form into secondary platforms, whether that's beautiful websites that show the photos. I think that's where we can learn from the young, because that's really their expertise. We need to marry traditional with the traditional rigor with the new methods that more people actually like to read. Because again, we don't like to be producing powerful stories that nobody reads. So I think that's really key in getting the young to be interested in investigative journalism. And we've seen a lot of examples in the conference of how many organizations have innovated investigative journalism. They look fun. They're complicated. But again, it's the work we need to put in to be able to get to that point.
Yeah, thank you. So let's make a TikTok account and
TikTok
find
for
you
Jack.
for Jack. So we have 7 minutes left. So maybe a minute each, concluding remarks from each of you. Perhaps can we start with you, Marie?
I mean, I think for me, I don't know if it will be even 1 minute. I think the most important image that I want to keep is this image of the canoe. We are all in together in this. And if the canoe is a very frail mean of transport, if one goes out or one is pushed out, then the canoe will sink. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind. So by having networks of journalists, having the possibility for journalists to be working with the government, to be working with the CSOs, that's where we will be able to go together in the same direction.
Thank you. Carmela?
Hard to follow that, Maria. I don't have any.
That was beautiful. Yeah.
But I guess what I will say is there's a reason why it's the journalists that the state actors run after, because it's the journalists who can have the power to stop the corruption. And that's why it's just sad to hear Mek Dara talking about feeling like he's a curse. But you shouldn't feel that way. You were doing your job, and you were doing a very important job. So I think it's important to, like the canoe, to work together, to continue doing what we're doing. We are stronger together. We've suffered a lot, but we need to, as they say, we need to continue to be hopeful so that we can continue the work that we're doing. Otherwise, there won't be too many people fighting corruption. And corruption is linked to poverty, inequality. We can always go back. Why we're doing what we're doing, right, is to promote democracy, to give voice to the voiceless. This is not just, just because we like to investigate people. At the end of the day, there are repercussions to ourselves, to our families, and to our communities.
Dara?
So for me, I think it's we don't we don't know the future. So I think hopefully and yes, Czech. I think Czech is we have that. I don't know like such power. We don't know how much such power it will have. So it is a really powerful tool to break the barriers and to arise and to shine together.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And I think for me, the power of collective action coming from the Pacific and some of our countries, for us in Solomons, we're still least developed country. Some are still developing. So just to understand our context better, not one size fits all. For us in the Pacific, we often, when we want to, geopolitics has always been an issue for us. And sometimes when it comes to the issues, these are not the issues which we feel strongly about. The issues for us in the Pacific are more different. It's all about having a good life, having access to water, sanitation for our people. So for the collective action is to understand the Pacific context better. And if there is any support or any thing for the Pacific, it has to be on our terms. And it has to be something that will also help us progress, especially in the work that we do, not just add more stress to our already limited resources. But just to understand the context of us in the Pacific better so that we can all be able to sail together in that boat.
Yeah, it's great to have journalists as speakers because you guys put it into beautiful words. I would like to thank the speakers coming all the way from Solomon Islands, Fiji, and overcoming the pain of Schengen visa. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank-